I have absolutely no idea what is going on with my hair today. What is this? I just woke up. But before I get into the topic of today's video, which is highly related to the fact that I just woke up, I want to mention two channels that I like quite a lot that are relatively new. One is called Ment the Denpa, and another is called Maggots Worry Guts. Both of these are very good channels. They do sort of personal vlogs similar to my own, but in their own style with their own personalities and stories. Ment, in particular, I think is quite an interesting character because he has these various arcs where, for example, he lived in a cave for a while, which is very Denpa. It's very neat core. Um, but in a way that you don't typically see expressed in these kind of videos. I spent a while talking about Forest Anon and the whole idea of getting back to nature and living isolated out there, but here is somebody who actually did that, which makes for a very fascinating story. Maggots Worry Guts has a pretty electric personality. She seems very comfortable on the microphone and all these things, and so I think you guys would find her pleasant to listen to as well. But the topic of today's video is sleep. A topic I've touched on many times, a topic that I have, this is seriously bothering me, man. A topic that I have dealt with in various ways, um, but never really seemed to resolve my problems with. I think sleep is very strange. I think sleep is very strange, and at this point it's starting to affect me in fairly noticeable ways because for the past few weeks I have struggled to sleep properly. I have struggled to sleep properly. I've been having these problems where basically um, I get less than 7 hours every single night, often less than six, often less than five. Um, and I wake up tired. I wake up feeling as though I did not sleep really at all, and it's very bizarre because I go to sleep at the same time every night, and I wake up around the same time every day. But you would think if I were on that consistent schedule and I weren't being woken up by an alarm, that I would get at least 7 hours, right? But that's not what happens. I wake up with very few hours, and I end up being very tired. Now, when I say go to sleep and wake up at the same time, I'm talking about roughly the same time, because obviously, um, in order to get 4 hours of sleep some nights, you've got to be kind of waving around there, but it's in about the same window, you know. There's not a huge discrepancy between each of these, and yet I'm in this bizarre situation. I'm in this bizarre situation where I'm sleeping at relatively consistently the same times, and yet I'm not sleeping enough. And I don't know if you can see it in the camera, like my eyes, like the bags under my eyes. I'm having so much trouble sleeping properly. Um, and it's starting to affect me, really. It's affecting my ability to study. I'm still engaging in all the same tasks for studying, but what I find myself doing is repeating the same tasks over and over and over, whether it's reviewing a certain card more times than I normally would, whether it is having to read back a certain sentence multiple times to understand it when normally I would only have to read it once or twice, you know, whether it is listening to a podcast in my target language and then having to to turn it back multiple times in order to understand a sentence that I would normally understand the first time I heard it because I would be razor focused on every word. The the normal way that I do this stuff is just not there. My normal sharpness is just not there. And the only thing I can attribute it to is the lack of sleep I've been having because I wake up every single day feeling like I didn't sleep at all. I wake up every single day getting less than the recommended amount of sleep. And this is a very concerning thing. I've attributed it to various things. I've called various called out various potential causes, but today I think I just realized the actual culprit. It's my window. Now, my window, normally I will cover up with some boxes, and I have these blinds that I have taped up over the normal blinds, like above the window, not directly on it. And those two things together keep out a large portion of the light, but they don't keep out all of it. And I am someone who literally cannot sleep if there is light coming through, my door slightly. If there is light from, I don't know, like a button on one of my power strips, I have to turn the power strips off. I have to make sure that the lights in the hall or the bathroom in the hall are turned off. I have to have all of these things in order for me to be able to sleep. I also can't sleep unless it's literally cold. So, for example, if I don't have the conversions in my head right now from Celsius to Fahrenheit, but just an example, if it's 74 degrees Fahrenheit right now, I can't sleep. I literally can't sleep if that is the temperature in my house. Oftentimes, if it's 72, which is like, I don't know what is that? Like fucking 20 something. I'm gonna actually look this up because I feel like I should know the answer. I'm gonna look it up live on air. 22. Yeah. So what did I say? 20 something. I was close. But 72 Fahrenheit, 22 Celsius, if that's the temperature, I will have a lot of trouble sleeping. It will be very, very difficult for me to get to sleep, no matter how tired I am, just because I'll feel so hot. Which, for most people, that would be a really moderate temperature, but not for me. I can't sleep in those conditions. I have to be like kind of cold in order for me to be able to get to sleep. And then this whole issue of the light. I have to have my room literally pitch black. It has to be pitch black in order for me to be able to sleep. And so what happens is basically the light enters into the room slightly from my window. Because I have this stuff here, but it's not blocking it all out. Light still comes in. It illuminates the room enough to see things. And then I wake up. And I wake up because it's right on my face, and then my body's saying, okay, time to wake up. But there's no adjustment that happens in the actual time when I'm going to bed, because I'm going to bed at, whatever, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, which is not when I like to go to bed. I like to go to bed at 7 p.m. I like to go to bed at 7 p.m. and wake up at like 4:30, wake up at 5. I was doing that for a while and it felt really good, but what always happens is something wakes me up or my sleep schedule shifts somehow, so I wasn't able to maintain it. But when I was doing that, it felt really good. But what happened here is it got pushed back for a while, and now I'm in this moment where my body wants to sleep and wake up at certain times. If it was totally black in here, I would most likely wake up at after my body has gotten the full amount of sleep. This is my current theory. I will have to test it and see if this theory is correct, but this is my current theory. And I'm in a situation now where that's not happening because of this window. So what I basically need to do is completely block out the light illuminating from the window, the light that the window's emitting. If I can do that, then I will likely see an improvement in my sleep. It may take a moment to adjust simply because the light has been waking me up at a certain time every day, but it's been waking me up when I haven't had enough sleep, like just scientifically speaking. And when my body, is screaming, I'm really fucking tired, this is not good. But it keeps happening. So, given the sensitivities I have to all this, I think I know what I have to do. There was an interesting comment left by another Denpa YouTuber whose name that I cannot pronounce, but I've linked in these videos before. He's a guy who's a big fan of pig brains and all this, but frankly bizarre stuff. Very, very interesting person. He left a very thoughtful comment on one of my videos where he basically said that what has happened to me is I've spent so many years being stressed that something about the pineal gland, basically there's this dysregulation going on as a result of all that cortisol that is making it to where I can't naturally produce the sufficient amount of melatonin because there's this deregulation going on. And I read this comment several days ago, so I don't totally remember everything he said. But I think that's part of it, because one of the most stressful times for me is actually the time when I'm going to sleep. I'll go to sleep and then all of a sudden I'm remembering all these different embarrassing things that I've done at different points in my life. I'm remembering all these bad things that have happened to me basically over the entirety of my life, and it is kind of torturing me, as I'm just trying to get to bed. Normally, that is one of the most triggering times for me, is basically just when I'm trying to get to sleep. And the weird thing is, it hasn't been as bad lately as it was in the past. Like last night, I had my MP3 player and I spent whatever it was, 42 minutes listening to a podcast in Spanish, and I turned it off at some point just with a switch, and I moved to lay on my side because that's usually the easiest way for me to get to sleep, the most comfortable for me. And I don't know how long it took for me to fall asleep, like maybe 15, 20 minutes, something like that. But I fell asleep after doing that, which makes sense because with headphones on, it is generally very difficult for me to fall asleep. But I knew, that it wasn't the time that I normally fall asleep, so I had them on. I'm also getting a speaker, so I don't have to use those when I'm going to sleep, and that's kind of the best of both worlds, because when I have audio, it's easier for me to fall asleep. But when I have headphones on, it's harder for me to fall asleep. So usually what I end up doing is using the speaker from my laptop, and then I fall asleep in, 15, 20 minutes on an easier night. But I digress. I was in this situation, and I didn't have any audio going, and I had some bad memories come to my mind, but they didn't hurt as much as they normally do, and I was relatively calm about it. I say relatively because it's on, we're talking about a scale. And I was able to get to sleep. But after what I would describe as a very good night for me, I still woke up. After how many hours of sleep did I get last night? Four? Four, 4.5, something like that. Not great. Not a great situation to be in. Um, and so that's how I woke up, right? And on a difficult night, what it would look like, and this is a very common occurrence for me, what it would look like is literally an hour and a half, 2 hours of me just remembering bad things, shuffling in my bed, and, feeling kind of tense in my muscles and in my body, having to remember all this stuff, and not being able to sleep because these memories end up fucking with me. And this is the life of somebody who can remember pictures and sounds and images, um, and can sort of feel like they're there again when they do remember those things because, if you've had some crazy fucked up shit happen to you as a child, and then you wake and you're awake in the world, and in any moment you could feel like you're there again because of the power of the images in your mind. It's highly likely that those things are going to continue to bother you, you know, which is the case with me, particularly when I'm trying to get to bed. And so I think there's just like this overload of cortisol when I'm trying to get to bed. I think there's just this, like, my system is getting overloaded with stress as I'm trying to get to bed because I'm remembering all these things. And I end up in this situation. It's very bizarre. It's a very bizarre situation. Um, I would describe myself as a very sensitive person because even with people who, especially compared to, um, the very cruel people I've known, but really, probably compared to most people who are relatively nice, um, there are things that they can say that can really get under my skin or upset me, and I keep recalling those things as well. So it's not just the really scary memories. It's also a lot of the small stuff that sticks with me. And that's what's weird about it, because you would think that if you've been through some crazy shit, crazy violent shit, like some of the stuff I've talked about on this channel from my past, you would think the smaller stuff wouldn't affect you as much, you know? But what I've noticed is like the last time I was in a situation where there was like someone with a gun pointed at me, for example, it was like my emotions just turned off, and like all of a sudden I could just behave and respond rationally. And yet, when, like, for example, a cashier just makes a passive aggressive comment to me, I end up thinking about that for weeks and months and sometimes years after it happened. It's weird, right? You know, I'm so desensitized to violence because of stuff from my childhood that when I see that, it's like I don't really have a reaction, you know? It's like there's something in my brain that just turns off in relation to it, you know? Obviously not when I see others in pain, for example. I have a very sensitive reaction to that. Specifically the emotions they're feeling behind it, but not actually the action itself. That's what's weird about it. It's like there's this this like wall or this layer that I'm behind that prevents me from really being able to be affected in the same way by the stuff that other people are easily affected by. And I think it's because of those early experiences that I had, the sheer quantity of them, the sheer intensity of them, how early they came as well. That something in my brain just turned off. And yet, it heightened my sensitivity overall. Maybe I would have been, more sensitive than the average person in general, like for genetic reasons or something. But I think as a result of those experiences, it like heightened my sensitivity overall, which is not intuitive to think about. I feel like if you've been through some crazy shit, the traditional wisdom is, well, you're not going to be affected by anything. Or maybe you're going to be affected most by like those types of things, like the type of stuff you went through. But I feel like I have like almost an easier time understanding crazy violent shit and people who are just really overtly unstable than I do understanding the daily minutia, passive aggression, people just being kind of shitty and stuff like that. The day-to-day stuff. I can't handle that. It makes me crazy. And I just obsess over it. And there are individual memories, that were intense and painful from the past, that follow me as well. But not the same number of them. That's what's weird. It's like I focus more on these moments where where people make me uncomfortable and make me upset. And I obsess over these things people have said to me that hurt me quite a lot. And the particular way in which they say it. Because it is harder for me to understand that than it is for me to understand someone just hitting me. Because that's something I can understand. Physical pain is something I can understand. It's something I can deal with. It's not something that bothers me. And moreover, I can hit back, Something that I have a lot of experience doing. Unfortunately, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't know, it's weird. It's something that I have trouble figuring out. Why is it that these like social situations end up hurting me a lot more than physically hurtful ones? Why do I have basically no reaction to certain types of situations but not others? I don't know. But it makes for a very bizarre world for me. I have, I think, very strict standards with who I interact with, even just online, because I know this about myself. I know that there are certain things people do that upset me, and I don't have time for it. I'm just not going to talk to people who make me feel that way. It's weird. If I can talk it out with somebody, and I know that I can talk it out with them, it's easy for me to get over things. For example, my best friend, some of you may know on the internet is No Thank You. That is someone that has definitely ruffled my feathers a number of times and made me very upset, but we're always able to talk it out. And if I'm able to describe how I felt about something to someone, and they're able to go like, yeah, I'm sorry about that, or, well, okay, but this is kind of what was going on with me, and I can be like, okay, I get that. I'm always fine with it, I'm always able to get over it in the end. or if I can just yell at somebody. If I can just yell at somebody and feel like I won in that moment or whatever, which is not a healthy way to go about things. I don't like to do that. I generally don't do that anymore. Um, then that's also a way that I kind of process that moment, and make it to where I don't have to live with it basically forever, you know, and obsess over it basically forever. Which, yeah, that's a super unhealthy way of going about things, and it basically emerges when you talk to people that you can't reason with, that you can't have these discussions with and then work it out, you know? And so I just don't talk to those people because I know what's going to happen. You know, one of two things is going to happen. One, they're going to say something that upsets me, and I'm going to try to reason with them, and it's not going to work, and then it's going to escalate, and I'm going to get really pissed off, and basically, do this animal shit asserting dominance until it something clicks in my mind and it feels like it's fixed, and that's not good. Or two, I am just going to take it in the moment and be like, okay, I have to be a moral person here. I have to do the right thing. Let's not, upset anybody. Let's just try to move past this. I got to get over this. And then what happens? I don't get over it, and I obsess over it long after it has been resolved. And I remember it exactly as it happened, well after everybody else has forgotten about it, because I'm just constantly thinking about it. And it's interrupting me during virtually every moment of the day. Those silent moments when I'm just doing things, all of a sudden the circus starts, circus comes to town in my brain, and it's that da 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 da, and oh, boom this, boom this, boom this, one after another. All these things that upset me at a certain point, they come to the front of my mind, and I'm just going crazy. That's what happens when I choose not to respond to whatever is upsetting me in that moment. And so, um, I have subjected myself to many of these painful things that I recollect, that my brain throws at me regularly, simply because I don't want to become, unreasonable and confrontational, um, with people that are simply unable to talk these things out in a calm way. Um, and so the solution that I've found to that dynamic is simply to not talk to people who make me feel like that, or not people who make me feel like that, because in the majority of cases that's an inevitability. Not to My solution is to not talk to people that I can't work things out with. Um, and that's really crucial for me. It's crucial for me to know who I can work things out with, who I can talk to about this stuff, when I've been hurt. Um, and it's interesting because I've actually met people who have never made me upset like this over the entire time that I've known them, multiple years that I've known them. It's very bizarre when you encounter people like that, people who just are just nice, like just something about their essence is like completely good and nice, in like every respect. Those are very rare people, but they are fascinating when you encounter them because it feels like they shouldn't exist. It's like, and I relate a lot actually to their approach, to life, because that's generally how I am. I don't say very mean things to people. I try to pay a lot of attention to how other people are feeling and to what their preferences are and all these things by default. Um, it's both as a product of my mindset and just as a product of like my default behavior. And I wish more people would do that. I think a lot of people simply don't have like the cognitive capacity to do all that, or they just don't care. You know, it's hard for them to really register other people's feelings or feel as though they're important. And so there is a lot of this callousness and cruelty that exists in the world that is difficult to bear, and it's difficult really to parse why it even exists. But we have to try to our best to empathize even with those people, because to do so, to not do so, will also lead to consequences for us. You know, it's harder to forgive them. It's harder to accept whatever may have happened if you can't also understand where they're coming from. But yeah, yeah. Needless to say, I get a lot going in my head. There's a lot on my mind when I'm trying to sleep at the hour of sleep. But I'm trying my best. I'm trying my best to make it, to get through. Hopefully tonight will be better, but I think in a few days when I have something better to put over the window, um, I'll be in better shape. I'll have to report whatever happens. Um, in conclusion, it's crazy. You know, human interactions are crazy. The world is crazy. Sleep is crazy. Perhaps even I'm crazy.